I'm Maria Devereux, ECD at Colenso BBDO, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the very first Love This Speaker Series for 2020. And to welcome you, John, to our stinking hot Kiwi summer.
Fantastic, we love it.
Good. A little bit about John. He has helped shape the advertising industry with a career that spans 6 decades. He's been given the D&AD President's Award, admitted to the US AAF Hall of Fame, was the recipient of the first Lion of St Mark Award at the Cannes Festival of Creativity, and in 2007 he was awarded a knighthood by the Queen. John founded BBH in 1982, where a young Nick Worthington learned all he could from the best in the business. Nick spent 10 years at BBH, then joined AMV BBDO London under David Abbott. In 2003, Nick joined Dave Droger on the Publicis Worldwide Creative Board and moved to New Zealand, first as ECD at Mojo and now as ECD at Colenso BBDO, or he's actually creative chairman nowadays. Nick has been personally recognised by D&AD as one of the top copywriters of all time and #1 ECD in the world by the Big One report. I'm going to hand over to the guys to get started, but you'll hear from me again towards the end when we need to wrap things up. We're also going to do a bit of a Q&A, so maybe keep possible questions in the back of your mind as we go. Over to you guys.
Fantastic.
Brilliant, yeah. Hey, cheers, thanks Maria, that was great.
We're both a bit croaky this morning, so it's the kind of competition of the croaks, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
who can croak more?
A new sound, yeah. Or maybe it's the PA system, John, and we're fine.
I blame that. I blame the PA system. Yeah. Technology buggers us again.
But no, thanks for thanks you guys for all coming today as well. But thanks, John, for taking the time to come and have a chat with us today. We were going to talk about like the most creating some of the most meaningful brands and stuff, and we will, I guess, ramble through some of that or touch on some of that as we go through. A little bit of addition to what Maria was saying about the history, but I kind of left art school in London in '84 or whatever, thought I'd get into advertising because I thought most of it was rubbish, and I thought I'd be able to make it a lot better quite quickly. It's quite, high. And then I got into some agencies and produced loads of rubbish, and and I couldn't work out why. And I noticed all this great work coming out of, just coming out, and I wasn't doing it, and I eventually worked out where it was coming from, and it was all coming from Great Polney Street, from BBH. It took me 2 years, I think, or 18 months, to kind of like redirect myself to BBH, and the best thing ever happened to me was John seeing our portfolio and just saying, yeah, I kind of want to hire you. It took you 6 months to actually get us in the door, which is a very, very long time at the time. But it was brilliant, and then 10 years there, and I kind of learned everything I kind of know. And pretty much everything I work with clients here and creatives here, I think, is like, as John talks, you'll probably go, oh, that's where he got it from, or whatever. Oh, that's what, yeah.
No, that's not right, Nick.
Yeah,
no.
I'll be my undoing today. Just another thing with the connection with John, somebody, I overheard them when we were coming in this morning just saying, oh, Nick must have, just kind of got John to come over here, and it's fantastic that he's done that, and that's not true at all. John's got a secret connection with...
I'm married to a Kiwi, so
tell us
I'm always here. You can't get rid of me.
So John's actually married to
Philippa Crane,
who's a weather girl.
That's right, a weather girl. That's right. She was very good at that, wasn't she? Yeah. You can consult her now, actually. Tell us what's going to happen. Is it going to rain later on? I don't know.
Yeah, TVNZ or something, was it? Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, something like that. I thought what would be fascinating as well is it was probably 25 years ago or that we last worked together, and my recollections of some of the things that happened there are probably really different from John's, and not quite sure. We'll talk about a couple of them, and it'd be good to get points of view of both things. The first one I wanted to talk about was Phileas Fogg, which was a snack food brand in the UK. I will shut up in a sec, John, but just my recollection was that middle of a recession in the UK in the 80s. A couple of guys get together, get an old snack food factory which was failing in a rundown, industrial town in the north of England. Start this brand, work with BBH, probably the first, right at the inception of the company.
Yeah.
Build the brand, do some incredible advertising, and the most incredible thing about the meaningful brands is the valuable brands as well. And at the time, a packet of crisps in the UK would have been 25p, 23p, 27p, pushing 27p. It's like, go to 30p and it's commercial suicide, right? And Phileas Fogg launched at that time into that snack food category and charged like £1.41, £1.19, £1.8 or something. It was all like really expensive little snacks, and the brand was the thing that kind of just got everyone to pay that ridiculous. It wasn't just a little bit more; it was a whole lot more. And that was fantastically interesting for me to watch about the power of creating a desirable brand. And when they sold, and they did quite quickly, I can't remember how many years you'd remember, but they rose rapidly, became very valuable, and then sold. And I heard a story, and again, you'll tell me if this is true, but that Ray McGee, who ran the company, paid all the staff in the factory like a whole chunk of money. Is this stuff true? Do you remember that, right? So what happened through that Phileas Fogg stuff?
Well, I always think it's a fantastic story. If you you can YouTube it and just go Phileas Fogg, and you'll see the ads. It was a terrific. It was at that time, bar snacks were growing, they were developing, and they were making exotic bar snacks. So that's what it was like that. And it was about innovation, and the classic thing to do with that, like Californian corn chips or tortilla chips from Mexico, or that, is to pretend these snacks came from these places. But of course, if you did that, and you see it all the time, you see beer brands do it. They pretend it's a German beer, but you have to probably say, I don't know if they do it here, and brewed in New Zealand goes in the right-hand corner of the TV screen. And we have the same thing. So we would have had to have put, made in the UK. And we said to them, why don't you, instead of pretending that you're made in California or you've come from Mexico, actually say to people where they're made. And they were at this factory they had, that actually they were given a grant to go there. It was an old steel town that had closed down, and the government was trying to get industry up there. So they got a grant to operate the factory. And it's a place called Medhamsley Road, Consett, County Durham. It is the most uninteresting place in the world, let me tell you. Right? But we said, why don't we just say that's where we're from, and invert that, what might be a problem, into an opportunity. And it's a story about, I think, how advertising, I've got this big thing about how it should be telling the truth. It's an odd thing to say, isn't it? Because most people think advertising's job is to hide the truth, is to kind of take something and pretend it's something else. And it's not. The great campaigns, the long-lasting campaigns, the campaigns that build great brands are the ones that find a truth and just find a way of exempling that captures your imagination. And this was so we did this with Phileas, and we just said, made in Medhamsley Road, Consett, County Durham. And we just turned them into very funny ads about our Californian corn chips were better than the ones that came from California or the ones that came from Mexico, whatever it was. And we just had fun with it. And it built the brand hugely, and they sold to United Biscuits. And people often say to me, so, your career, they say, what's the advertising you're most proud of? What's the one and you always kind of go, it's one of those very difficult questions. But I always say, actually, this campaign we did for Phileas was when they sold to a company called United Biscuits, to keep the advertising going, they had to keep the factory going. And so we saved those people's jobs in the factory. And I always thought that was the best thing a piece of advertising had done. And that's why I really love it. But if you go online, you can see them. And they're the Mignon Morceau, which is one of the funniest ads I think we made, actually, which was hilarious. Which was great, written by Steve Hooper and Dennis Lewis. And just wonderful, wonderful. But anyway, have a look at it. But that's a lovely story, I think, about, and it contains virtually everything we should be doing in our industry is, don't be afraid of the truth. The truth can be very, very interesting, and actually it stays with people. Then people love you even more because you've told the truth. It's like a person, we like people who tell the truth. And I was talking yesterday at Saatchi's, and there's a wonderful art historian, art critic, Boris Goyes, who's at New York State University. He's written about art and truth, and it's a beautiful piece about if art isn't telling a truth, it is just decoration. And, you know, fine, but it has no power. And in a way, you know, that's what advertising is looking to have, power. It's looking for power. And you get power through telling the truth. And our job, creative people's job, just make it interesting, you know. And it's, you know.
And that, the whole bravery strategy of charging so much, because, I mean, I hit it all the time where you've got all of these category, and we all do, I think, we've all got these category kind of boundaries, and they say, well, this is where you need to play, this is where you need to operate, and you can't change these things. To make, you know, something so bold and to hit that price point, was that because they cost a lot to make, or was it a part of the marketing strategy?
Partly that, but they believed they were making a superior product. You know, I spent my life in meetings with clients, you know, because you're the creative person in there. You're trying to sell an idea, so you sell the idea, and then the client's there, and so you have to hang on and have that really boring conversation about why sales aren't going very well in the Northeast, and you think, well, no, what the hell? It's not my bloody job. I've done my bit, you know. But you stay in there because you're trying to get them to buy the bloody idea, aren't you? You look interested, and you're not. You're bored, rigid, you know. And they're talking about kind of, you know, well, you know, maybe we should do some more on-pack promotion, or maybe sales distribution isn't very good. And I was always sitting there going, you ever thought about making a better product? It's a kind of an interesting concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
Make a better product. And virtually all the things that our successes were where the client was actually had that point of, should we make it a better product? Let's start from there, as opposed to, can we market our way out of this, which is what most of them try and do, because that's what they are, they're marketing people. So marketing people do what marketing people do. They market, you know. But you're saying, you know, just why don't you make it better? Interesting concept, you know. I mean, we did that all the time, but, you know.
I mean, there's a list of them at BBH, and again, it was just normal when I got there. This is just what we did and what happened. And I think I've seen, you know, since I've seen it's really unusual, some of the stuff that went on. But I remember Haagen Dazs had probably not advertised in the UK at that point when BBH started working, maybe not even across Europe. And you know, the sort of the choc ice, the ice cream market, again, is much like the chip market. There was these category kind of conventions that, again, and it's that kind of chiller price or whatever it is. And, you know, no one's going to pay, again, more than, you know, 30p for you know, an ice cream on a stick. And it's, you know, and that's kind of what it is, and that's the boundaries you work within. And then somehow, and again, you can explain how this happens with Haagen Dazs, but they launched with BBH in the market in the UK with and we had gold coins then. We had the pound coin, right? And you just had it, it's just easy. And they said, well, it's a pound, you know, make it easy for people. That's what I thought anyway. It was just, oh, it's actually quite, I just got this gold thing in my pocket, and I'll just give you, and I'll get a lovely ice cream. And it kind of worked. But they went from, you know, category, you know, 35p, maybe 33p for one of those cornettos or something, to a pound, with incredibly sexy category defining advertising, which kind of took ice cream out of kids and play into adult and kind of sensuality. And it was, you know, it felt normal to me there, but for, you know, imagining people taking those risks to break so many kind of boundaries all at the same time and then have ridiculous success is kind of...
Well, it was an interesting, because it was launched in the midst of a recession. My whole career in advertising in the UK has been going from one recession to another, actually. It was quite funny. But there's always an opportunity there. And they were launching Haagen Dazs premium ice cream. It wasn't a very big market in the UK because ice cream was seen as for kids. You know, there wasn't much of a premium category. But what was there was all very, you know, they just endlessly talked about ingredients and fresh cream. And we thought we'd try and play on a different playing field. It's the great classic thing to do. If everybody's playing on that field, go over there, play on a different field. And we just did this whole thing about sensuality. And it came out of how people talked about the ice cream when they ate it. They said it was like in their head, and it was kind of quite sensual. And so we created a campaign dedicated to pleasure about this was quite sexy ice cream. And it was very interesting if you could see the ads, and you can look them up. But what we did on the left-hand side, we just took, and it's classic BBH this, we went through their brochure, how they made ice cream, and we just took phrases about how they made ice cream, but we took out certain words for it that were very sexy. So you made those big, you know, deep, intense, or whatever it might be. And on the right-hand side, we had a very sort of wonderfully, Jean-Luc Sieff, the French photographer, took the pictures. Couples enjoying ice cream.
Naked,
and it was a
naked couples.
Partly naked.
Mainly naked.
No, you're getting carried away.
With
Nick.
ice cream dripping on them, you know.
Yeah. You're getting the fantasy going here, but anyway, they were, and it was just a wonderful yin and yang. You know, often, you know, we talk about the logic of advertising, which is, you know, the logic and the emotion. You know, and it was a classic example of logic and emotion put together. But virtually all, you know, I always used to say that BBH was a very old-fashioned advertising agency. We just believed in doing product demonstrations. That's all we ever did. All the best work we ever did was a product demonstration in some way or another. And the product was central to it. And we told a story around the product. I mean, Audi was exactly that. I mean, the latest one they've done on clowns, I don't know if you've seen it, Audi clown. It's a lovely, just a product demonstration, but I'll wrap it around this story about most people on the road drive like clowns. And then, bang, I've got all the devices. So the car, the product is central to telling the stories. Levi is exactly the same. They were just product demonstrations, and that's all we ever did.
I know, going back to those truths with products and going back to the beginning, you know, of things and finding the sort of the gold there, the thing that's sort of like super interesting, and then obviously how you, and usually that's been overlooked, right? They find it boring, like, you know.
Well, I think you look at advertising, I mean, I'm not doing that thing, you know, I still think the best ads today are the ones where they do that. Because you know, principles remain, practices change is my kind of phrase. It's, you know, the principles of what we do are fundamentally the same as they've always been. The way you tell that story, how you tell that story, where you tell that story changes. And I think you've got to do that. You've got to look at kind of how am I holding on to the principles, but interpreting it for a modern day. But I still think, you know, I look at it, and you know, the best work that we were doing back when I was there, doing stuff in the 90s and 80s and 90s, would still work today. In fact, you know, we were talking about a campaign yesterday. I showed it yesterday at Saatchi for Levi's, and it was a print campaign, and it was shot by Richard Avedon. I mean, he just got people off the street, literally, who were wearing Levi's, and with just great phrases about why they like them, and I like them best just before they fall apart, and it was capturing that sense of what a pair of jeans was like, and we shot, and he shot them, and we just hand wrote the lines, and you could run them today in Vogue, and they would stand out so much apart from the usual fashion crap that goes on in there, because they, you know, anybody in Vogue doesn't know what an idea is, you know. They've got no idea, you know.
I mean, chatting now, it's sort of like, for me, it kind of, you think it's really simple. The formula's simple. Is like, find a truth, you know, in the product, find a consumer truth, find out, you know, a way that you can talk about it that no one else is doing, and just do that, and you'll be successful. And in many ways, I think that is true, but it's still insanely hard to do it for some reason.
Well, yeah, I can't do this thing. I've got, I try and reduce everything down to 3.
Yes, okay,
you know, my triangle, right? You know, and you know, I thought it was good enough for God. It's probably good enough for us. He believed in the Holy Trinity, so I thought, you know, and I think if you can take anything away from today, you just go my triangle, which is this is advertising. That's all you have to remember. Take it, put it on your wall, and say, are we answering that? And it's very simple. And it's the first one at the top of the triangle is it memorable? Because if it's not memorable, go home now. All right, pack up, go home, fold everything up, and, you know, I don't know, just get a job somewhere else. So it's memorable. Because, you know, it's amazing how much stuff you see, and nobody's ever going to remember this. I mean, something like you know, you can Google whether this is true or not, but they say we're exposed to something between 4,000 and 10,000 marketing, advertising, branding messages a day. Quite how somebody calculates that, I've got no bloody idea. But anyway, whatever it is, it's a lot, isn't it? And so, you know, that's the first case. Then the other, on the left-hand side, my left-hand side, is it motivating? Because I've stopped you, brilliant. Now, is it motivating? Have I given you something that's going to go, wow, that's really good. I like that. I'm going to act upon that. And then at the other side is it truthful? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to build a long-term relationship with people. And you don't build long-term relationships with people by lying. It's very simple, isn't it? A number of marketing people who don't quite understand this, and that is a lie. Well, it's not a lie, it's the way we see it. No, it's a lie, you know. And so that's it. We can all go home now, have a bit more breakfast, and we've done it. You know, that's it. Is it memorable? Is it motivating? Is it truthful? That's it. Bang. And you literally, if it's not answering those three, then it probably is almost certainly not going to work.
That's cool. I've written that one down. That's a new one for me. So, yeah, I'll be rolling that one out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know I've got no idea of time and all that kind of stuff, but I did want to talk a little bit about the early days of BBH, and it started, I think I was like 99, and my partner then, John, was 100 person, you know, and then it grew and grew and grew and became international and stuff like that. And so in terms of like size, and even like going back to the Phileas Foggs, which were a startup, and then they become big and owned by United Biscuits, but what's your views on like size and growth, and is there a sort of sweet spot in your mind? Or
it's one of the great, we always used to say, I mean, Nigel, my partner, had this great phrase, is how big will we get before we get boring? And you never know until you're there, really, you know. And because I think if you try and stay true to your principles, then your growth will be limited by your points of view. And the problem, I think, with advertising agencies is they don't have a point of view. They're all things to all people. They don't actually sort of say, this is what we believe in. When we started BBH, we had this policy of not doing speculative creative work because we believed it demeaned our creative product, and that we weren't just going to give it away. And, you know, lots of people said, well, you know, it's an interesting position, but you won't grow very well with that, and you won't be able to get certain types of business. And we said, fine. That's what a brand definition is about. It's about believing in something and actually taking a stance. And of course it limits your growth, but actually it builds long-term value.
So I've seen you in meetings, John, a long time ago, where they were probably pitch kind of meetings, and no creative work, right? So BBH didn't present creative work, it was just strategy, and it was usually a brilliant strategy. But if I remember rightly, you'd have a couple of ideas in your head, and you'd be able to have a pad there, and you might just draw a little thing, you know, with a line, and it looked like, you know, like this is just, oh wow, the strategy can go straight into like it's amazing work, and that was like, was that conscious, or
it was a technique, which is. I'm sort of, you know, because I was brought up a good Catholic boy. I'm now completely agnostic, by the way. Don't worry about it, anything like that. So I'm quite irreligious. But, you know, I always loved the idea that I thought religion was great, because it never actually showed you heaven, did it? It just said, believe. Believe, you know. So my job in pitches was to sort of, you know, they'd do that, and they were brilliant, and they were fantastic presentation. We took the strategy apart, reconnected, said, this is the opportunity, and now John will tell you what we're going to do with it. And so I had to get up and have this kind of like vision, you know, like that. And I used to talk about what they could do and where they could go and stuff like that. And you could see, oh, that could be exciting. That. But if you showed it to them, you know, if somebody said, actually, I've got a picture of heaven, a lot of people in white and on clouds, you go, fuck that, I'm not going there. And that's bloody boring, maybe better in hell. You know, they're more interesting people. But you don't, you know, you can. So the idea was never actually show them, you know, never, and you kept them panting, and they wanted to kind of, and whereas they'd gone to the agency previous and they'd shown them something, and it was all right. And they said, oh, I'm not sure it's very good. Oh, that BBH, it could be. The dream is better. The dream, you know, I have a dream, you know. And that was the task. And it worked incredibly well. And to such a point that I remember it was about 10 years after we'd started, and we were pitching for a piece of business, and it had got into the press. They try to keep it quiet, never does, you know. This is the pitch, this is who's pitching. And the other agencies were calling the client up, saying, this is unfair, BBH, you're on the shortlist. And the client said, well, so why? Well, they're not going to present creative work. And all of a sudden, a problem had become the opportunity. An advantage. And they were, and this client, very nice, we actually did work with them in the end, said, look, I haven't asked you to do creative work. You've just decided that's the only way you can pitch. That's your decision. But it was a very, you know, I think the point there is that agencies don't have a point of view. You know, and we all know the joke about, you know, what time is it? What time would you like it to be? I mean, that's a classic about advertising. And unless you do that, unless you have a point of view, why should anybody really respect your point of view? Because you don't have one. And that's why the industry, I think, today is not as... in many ways, has never been as highly regarded as it should be. You're just trying to flog stuff, you know.
Yeah, it will change. And I remember one time vividly when you're talking about point of view, this was a wonderful thing, probably about leadership actually in creative direction, was we were working the weekend and on I think it was Cadbury, we were maybe pitching for it. And
slightly rippled with the flat underside.
Yeah.
Great line.
We won the business, yeah. Anyway, as we working at the weekend, and John came in to see us, and we had an idea which I think was Stephen Dennis's idea, which we thought was killer, and we were pretty sure that's what we should do. And you came in that day and said, he said, lads, he says, you know, the thing is you've got to have a point of view, and I kind of went, yeah, I've got a point of view, John. I think it's Stephen Dennis got this great idea and it's like this. And he says, yeah, but I don't agree with that. And at which point I realised that, OK, you've got to have a point of view, but, you know, then there's a role for the creative direction. It was just a beautiful moment in leadership.
I think on that, just to sort of pick up on that, and you know, you're all creative people. It's, you know, I always say, what do you believe in? You know, what do you believe in? You can't just become an art director or a writer without some certain beliefs. I want to do work like this. You have to have a philosophy. You know, what is it? Why? Why do you do that? Because you're not just a hired gun. Because I do think great work, you put a bit of you into it. It's an expression of self. You know, and I define creativity as, you know, there are many ways of defining creativity. You know, there are lots of them out there. But, you know, somebody once said to me, you know, music is the greatest of all art forms. And I said, no, I think it's actually the second greatest of all art forms. I think life is the greatest of all art forms. Because we're all creative. Everybody's creative. Just some people earn their living by it. That's the difference. And so therefore, I've always said my personal belief is that, you know, creativity is an expression of self. And if you listen to, you know, other writers or film directors or painters, they always say, this is what I wanted to say, this is what I wanted to do. And they're putting themselves into their work. And even though you're working in advertising, you're a designer, whatever it is, you're putting yourself into that work. You do stuff that you like. And it's got to be that way. So you've got to have a philosophy. You've got to say, well, what do I believe in? And mine was always around irreverence. I loved irreverence as a sort of an attitude. And I really, you know, and I was many years ago asked to give a talk on what I looked for in a great idea. And I thought, you know, well, something I like, which I thought was going to make a very short speech. And so I had to sort of stand back and think about it. And that's when I realised that everything I loved, the work I was doing, had this streak of irreverence around it. And then my talk was about irreverence and how actually it skewered art. So art went from being revering, so if you were Michelangelo or that, your job was to make people believe, you know, Sistine Chapel or wherever it was, or, you know, art, communication was in the hands of authority, so the church, the state, leaders, whatever it was. But gradually over time, art, communication got into the hands of the people and they started questioning. So artists started questioning and that irreverence came in to art. So the Dadaists were ridiculing authority because of the First World War. That's what they were about. And that streak of irreverence gives a kind of work a power. You know, you look at Banksy today, I think he's probably the most significant
He's got a point
artist.
of view, right?
He's got a
Which
point
is
of view,
counter.
which he
Yeah,
will
yeah,
keep
yeah.
going for. And that, therefore, kind of, because what you're trying to do with that irreverence is you're challenging the status quo. You're saying, it's not that, it's this. And that's what we're doing all the time in advertising. It's not that brand, it's this brand. It's this. You buy this car, not that one. Or wear that pair of trousers, not that one. Or buy that, whatever it was. So irreverence in one's work, I found was very... So that was my philosophy, and that's what I loved. So when I was looking at work, I was, I don't know, it's not really challenging me, it's not really setting me up. And that way, I had a point of view, and that's what I was trying to... What's your point of view?
Yeah.
What do you believe in? You know, and that's what creativity is about. So I generally believe it is an expression of self. And the other thing I always used to say to all the teams is that, you know, when you're looking at work, you know, and you're presenting it, do you love it? And if they went, well, yeah, I think it's quite... I said, no, that's not good enough. You've got to love it. No, at least one person in the world loves it. We know that. Now we can build out from there. But, you know, this... I've never believed this thing of, you know, people say to me, oh, you know, you're very clever because you can stand in the shoes of other people. No, I can't. I've got no bloody idea what a housewife thinks in Scunthorpe. No idea. In fact, I'm not even interested. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm not. It would just drag you down. I've always thought great work inspires people. I always thought work is there to bring people to you. We live in a world where we're trying to be liked by everybody. You know, they talk about, we have consumer understanding. That's a phrase I'm sure you've all heard. It's absolute bullshit. I mean, we even say at BBH, well, when I was there, and they said, I used to sit there thinking, God, consumer understanding. So it's you and God. You kind of worked out what these people think. It's bullshit. We have consumer knowledge, which is different from consumer understanding. We have knowledge of what's happening out there, what's going on, and we use that. But the idea that you can understand somebody else, it's just, I don't understand myself sometimes, you know. I mean, why have I done that? That was a bit daft.
But going back, I mean, again, we're consumers too, right? And you...
a word I hate, by the way. I like to use the word audience. If you look it up in the dictionary, it's a horrible word. Just about making people consume.
But you probably ate ice cream. Anyway, no,
Go on.
But you did drive an Audi Quattro. You did wear Levi's
I did.
jeans.
Still do.
You probably ate Haagen Dazs.
I still wear.
Probably had the occasional, packet of Phileas Fogg. So you do have insights and stuff like that. And if it fits,
yeah, but they're yours. They're not.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, you can't empathise with everyone, right?
No, you can't. I mean, it's impossible. Nobody. I mean. Do you think Picasso sat down and went, no, look, I mean, you know, portraits, they're all getting a bit boring. I know, I'll do Dora Maar, but I'll put the eye down. Well, I've done some research, and it says if you put the eye down on the right-hand side and move the one up to the left, it really works. Or Matisse went, I know, I've read the latest research, it said lots of blue. Put more blue in. Matisse,
He was going blind.
more blue.
Yeah, the guy, you couldn't see any other colours.
I mean, I think the other thing, too, is I don't use advertising as my measure for work that I do. I don't look at advertising when I was doing it. I looked at what was happening in film, or what was happening on the theatre, or what was happening in books or stories or whatever. These are the things that inspired me. As I used to always say, you know, I work in advertising, I don't live in advertising. And I don't want to. It's a kind of dull world. You know, it really is.
John, on that irreverence thing as well, and as a sort of trait, that's your trait, right, and your sort of signature. I mean, it is interesting how much that is borne out through some of that. And I was going back, I was thinking about Audi and like, the beginning of Vorsprung Technik across Europe and stuff, which was, and ads that were in German. We were running, you know. Yeah. But the irreverence in that stuff. So first of all, selling German cars to the British, and you know, there's always a little tension there. To then take the piss out of the Germans, but to the truth that they are amazing engineers, but they're not funny.
Yeah, that was the, yeah.
Which was pretty much the insight. So the British could be funny and take the piss out of the Germans somehow, but also celebrate their incredible sort of like sticking to the story, to making great cars. And it was totally, irreverent.
Well, when we did...
but totally true too.
Yeah, when we did... Well, because nobody thought Audi was a German car.
Right.
That was the problem.
Yeah, okay.
Because there was Mercedes-Benz and
Pretty sexy,
BMW and Thor's very German and Volkswagen and Audi they thought was kind of made in Brussels or Belgium or something like that. And we said, no, it's a German car. And so that's where we decided to use this phrase, Vorsprung durch Technik, which actually they had used. It wasn't, I didn't invent it. I just saw it on a factory wall.
On a factory gate or something.
Or something I can't even now remember. And I just said, what's that? And when we were talking about how we were going to tie the campaign together, I said, why don't we just bring it all together with this phrase, Vorsprung durch Technik, which means leading with technology or springing forward with technology. And they did some research on it. The research said, whatever you do, don't use it. Don't use that. And unfortunately, we had two great clients at Audi, Brian Bowler and Johnny Mazaris. And they said, but we are German. We got, And so we did, and the rest is history. And it became very famous. But the other thing, too, was to sort of, for style-wise, make them the sort of German with a sense of humour, because they could laugh at themselves. And so one of the first spots we did was for an aerodynamic Audi that could drive from Munich to Marbella faster and quicker than
on
one tank of petrol. And so you get on the beach before the Germans, and which is a joke. I don't know if you know that joke, but we all know that joke. Anyway, so the point about this story is, and it was one of those great moments in my career when at that time we dealt with the UK, but we, out of politeness, we used to go to Germany to present what we were doing. And so they said, so you've got to present this commercial, you've got to go to Ingolstadt, which is just outside Munich, and present this commercial. And I go, no, that's not my job, it's the account manager's job, I just do the ads. No, John, I think you've got to go. And it was Jerry Judge and I, oh God. And I'm thinking, oh no, I'm going to have to present this ad. And so if you want to get on the beach before the Germans, you better buy an Audi 100. Oh God, anyway, so we go there. Big conference room, I go in, all these guys sitting around, they all smoke like that with a cigar. Oh yeah, you're Englanders, you're English, but you're going to show us your commercials. Yeah, good. And so we go through the whole thing about kind of, well, we're trying to establish Audi, it's, like that, there's Mercedes, but you're the German with a sense of humour. Yeah, wie like a sense of humour. The smoke on the cigarette, and I'm thinking, oh God. So anyway, so I go through the whole thing, and I say, it's got a bit of a joke in it at the end. Don't worry about it. You'll sell a few more cars by doing it. Yeah. So sure, it's a commercial. So the commercial goes out. Now you have to understand your geography. See, this is a great lesson in life. Ingolstadt is in the south. It's in Bavaria. So I show this ad, and it gets to the line. So if you want to get on the beach before the Germans, you better run it. And they all leap up out of their seat. Yeah, that Teutonic lot in the north, they're all the same. They're always on the beach with their towels. And I'm thinking, what the fuck's going on? I'm going, where am I? And of course, I had failed to understand that I'm in Bavaria. Bavarians do not see themselves as that Teutonic lot in the north.
Yeah.
So you kind of learn about life, you learn things. Yeah. It was a great moment, that. But it was good. Anyway, but research said, don't use Vorsprung durch Technik.
No.
And we did, and it became a famous line. They still use it.
John, I was going to ask you about getting knighted, right, and become. Do you get knighted to become a sir? Is that what happens? Is it
That's
being
what happens.
knighted?
That's what
knighted.
happens.
Okay,
yeah.
So take us through what happens, because I don't know. It's
she
down on the
approaches
knee
you
and
with a sword.
Who's she? Go on, boy.
And she puts it in hope she's going to hit you in the right place.
I mean, are you talking about?
This was 07, so it's like...
But he's talking about the Queen.
The Queen, yeah.
He's talking about the Queen approaching you with a sword,
yeah,
down on one knee.
Down on one knee, taps you on both shoulders, and now bugger off.
Rise, Sir John.
You got right. She doesn't actually say a rise, Sir John. No, that's right. But it was quite interesting. It was lovely. Well, Philippa was there. She can talk me through it as well. What was amazing, actually, she was incredible. And she has, you approach it, and there's a guy saying something to her, and another guy giving her, because you get a medal and then she does the sword. And the guy, he obviously says, it's John Hegarty, that's been announced anyway, advertising opened their offices around the world, so, taking advertising internationally. So she said to me literally, that's fantastic, congratulations, I understand you've taken your agency throughout the world, which is rather wonderful. And how many offices have you got? And I said, well, at that time we had 7. And she said, that's wonderful. And she shakes your hand, and you're told, you don't start a long conversation. Well, it's in fact fascinating you asked it, but I tell you what, it's really difficult, No. And she shakes your hand, and she gives it back to you. It's a great technique. And it is.
Pushes it back.
No, she does it like that. She goes, that was very nice, thank you.
Oh.
And the next guy, so just some people hold on, they hold on. Oh, it's so lovely to meet you. Shaking her hand off, poor woman. So she gives it, and they tell you she'll do that. But Alan Parker, the film director, who I know very well, Sir Alan Parker, tells a very funny story, because they tell you what it's going to do. And so he's getting his knighthood. And there's somebody, and he told me the story, there's somebody being shown what to do, and they have sort of knighthoods from around the world. This guy, I think, was from Mauritius, and he just couldn't get it to understand that you approach, then you knelt, then you did that, and he kept getting it wrong. They give you a little rehearsal, and the equerry turns to Alan Parker and he says, Sir Alan, you're a film director. Perhaps you could help me guide this gentleman. And Alan goes, shit, I'm getting my bloody night and I'm still working. That was very funny.
No, brilliant. Yeah, well, a couple of things. One was the sort of the move from, maybe we're talking about making valuable brands and making companies a lot of money with truth behind them, so they're enduring ideas and stuff like that. A lot of the way the world's moving, at least the way I see it, is kind of, there was purpose-driven brands, but then kind of doing good in the world. And, brands have the opportunity to change the world, perhaps more than governments, it may be. I think D&AD, and my belief is that, creativity can change the world, right? And it decide, do you want to change it for the better or the worse? And what's your point of view as kind of brands go forward, and big brands and small brands and stuff, and who's doing what there?
Yeah, I'm very suspicious of that.
Yeah.
We make, I don't know, snacks, and we're going to change the world. Sod off.
Yeah,
Can make a snack. I'm very, I just think what brands should be doing is making their products in a way which is, doesn't, scorch the earth. It makes things correctly. It employs people properly. Get your house in order. I don't want brands lecturing me on how the world should be whilst they screw up a factory over there and, don't give people a proper job and don't give them proper health care. And, it's cynical. It's just absolutely cynical. And when I see that, I go, come on. Why don't you make your product correctly? Why don't you care for the environment through the way you operate? Let's do that first before you then start telling the world.
But like going back to what you were saying before about maybe the solution to that is not communication, it's make a better product.
Make a better product.
Make a better product, and then tell people about it, perhaps.
I've cynically, I've worked on stuff where, brands have had our purpose, where, and then as soon as they've hit a bump in the road, shit, they dump that like there's nothing, and then back to now flog them more, the share price, and you go, it's just cynical. And I think that cynicism is terrible. Of course, cynicism was also the death of creativity. So so I've never liked cynical things.
No.
So I don't like that. Every time I see it, I go, yeah. It's like Starbucks, saving the world one cup at a time. You can go and look at their kind of purpose. It's on their website. Bringing the world together one cup at a time. Pay your fucking taxes, Starbucks. That's a great way of bringing the world together, isn't it? It's just cynical. I loathe it, and I loathe them even more for saying it. How do they do it? Or Pepsi, another one. We'll rot your teeth, but never mind. We're going to save the world. Just ridiculous, isn't it?
So it's got to be real and fundamental before it gets into the stories and stuff.
And it gives us a bad name because we get blamed for it. Because we're the advertising people saying it. Well, we didn't, I used to say to clients, I'm not saying it. These brands are the ones that are saying it, not me. Why don't you have a go at them? It's not advertising doing it, it's them. They're in charge of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like eternally optimistic about the potential for brands to. But I think I'm on the same place as you, that to change your product, change your relationship, change the things you do, and then tell people about it. But I think it feels like there's a shift in the world at the moment, from the next generation.
Well, I hope so. I do hope so. I mean, I think it. We have to think of the kind of world we're leaving our children and our grandchildren and all those things. And I think we've got to hold people to account. That's my point. You've got to hold them to account. Yeah. Why are they doing that? Why are they saying that? And this cynicism has to go. Put your house in order before you start telling somebody else something.
So next generation, young people coming through, incredible force of, optimism, I think. With the garage, so you've actually detached yourself from BBH completely now.
I'm now running the garage.
Running the garage Soho, which is kind of like back to small again in many ways, 8 people or something, and a bunch of young people who are idealistic, whether they want to make money or change the world or do both.
Oh, they want to make lots of money, I can assure you.
So tell us a little bit about.
Well, the garage is an early stage investment company. So we have people coming to us with ideas. They'd like to start this business, and then we help get them finance and help them grow their business. Our mantra is: don't just start a business, build a brand, because whatever you do, that's where value will reside. So whatever idea you've got, somebody else will copy it. They'll copy the idea, they'll copy the technology, but they won't be able to copy the brand. And it's getting these young entrepreneurs to understand the value of a brand. Some get it, some don't. And the ones who don't, we just say, fine, the door's downstairs, why don't you use it? But, it's interesting that a lot of these young entrepreneurs really want to get into broadcast as fast as they possibly can. It's very interesting. My final days at BBH, I was dealing with lots of, very large corporations, and all the marketing directors were desperate to get their digital strategy right, and, broadcast, no, we don't do that anymore, it's digital and stuff like that. Whereas all these young entrepreneurs, they're going in the opposite direction. I want to get broadcast. And it was interesting. I was talking about maybe, there's no question that our industry, because I still feel myself part of advertising, is in decline. There's no question. Our influence is diminished. People don't take us as seriously as they used to. Digital has undermined the purpose of building a brand. In fact, I could make a very good case for how social media is killing brands. And getting people to understand how to build a brand is, I think, the thing that we've got to do. But the only way I think you're going to do it is actually to regenerate a creative revolution, is go back to the way it started in the early 60s, late 50s in America. And if you think about it, the creative revolution came out of agencies like, those who know about Dordain Bernbeck and people like Papa Koenig and Lewis. And they worked on very, very small pieces of business. They didn't have big brands. Volkswagen, when Dordain took it over, was a funny little German car brand. Nobody really wanted it. It was like, what? There's, General Motors and Chrysler, and it was a small little company. Then he went on to do work for a Jewish bread company called Levi's. You don't have to be Jewish to eat Levi's. So they worked on Avis. Avis was actually a very, very little small car rental company. Avis was Hertz was the big one. Avis was this and they pretended it was number 2. And so the point about it was they were working on very, very, very small pieces of businesses that desperately wanted to make a difference, but they didn't have much money. And they did. And that revolution was born out of that. And of course, the work transformed those companies. People saw it and thought, blimey, this creative stuff works. And they all started to pile in. I think we've got to go back to that. I think that's the way to rejuvenate the creative industry. I'm sorry, yes, we do have to work for, I'm not going to mention any names of it, but I would be focusing on those young smart entrepreneurs who want to do something daring, want to do something different, are prepared to risk things to make a difference. And I think that way will rejuvenate our industry. But you'll have to rethink the way you structure your companies. You know, you're not going to walk away with $1 million after year 3. You know, think about the long term, not the short term. Remember, you know, money has a voice, but it doesn't have a soul. You know, that's the problem, I think, in our industry today. We've become obsessed with cash, and it's killing our creativity.
But one of the examples that kind of have come out of the garage, you know, you got a lot of companies at different stages, I guess, building their brands. But the Camden Brewery one, right, is kind of, I don't know if that's like one of those dream things. And I know there's loads of people here, and most of us have got an idea for a little brand or, you know, something we want to do. That'd be great if we could get it off the ground and kind of do it in a very short amount of time and make a heap of money and do some good as well, you know, and that kind of stuff. But Camden Brewery, you know, came up and there was, it pretty much came from nowhere. And it built a brand, you know, really went sort of brand heavy. And then within, again, a bit ago, going all the way back to Phileas Fogg, you know, just had a point of view and then got bought out by a big, you know, by InBev or whatever. And so do you want to just, what happened there? Because that's almost like a little kind of
It was kind of a wonderful story, really. I mean, it's a story where I'm connected because it was my son-in-law who started it, Jasper. And I always say to him he had 3 brilliant ideas. And the first thing he had was that he was going to call it Camden Town Brewery, which is genius. He doesn't own Camden Town. It'd be like Soho House. They don't own Soho, but they don't. So that was the first thing. And Camden in London, you maybe don't know, but it's the most visited tourist site in London. Camden Market gets more people than anybody else. So that was fantastic. And a borough with a phenomenal...
Did it come from Camden, the beer?
Yeah, the brewery's
there was some truth.
The brewery's in Camden Town, yeah. And once he decided that, he had to put the brewery in Camden Town. So he got support for doing that. And then so that was fantastic. He then decided, because he's a good Aussie boy, that most craft brewers are doing pale ale and all these odd ales. He said, I want a lager. I want a lager because, you know, I'm Australian. I drink lager. And actually, lager is 80% of the market in the UK. So he did a craft lager. And then he got his timing right. So there's 3 things. And you know, the other thing he then did was that he called his lager Hells, which comes from Helles, which is German for I've forgotten the
hops, is it, or something? Yeah.
But he called it Hells. Now I always kind of go, now imagine, I don't know, a large brewer, you know, here going, oh, should we call our lager Hells? Oh, I don't know how. Oh, not very good that. You know, a lot of people don't. You know, might put some people off. You know, all that bullshit that they'd come up with, and they wouldn't make an interesting decision. But he called it Hells, and just had a thing which was raise Hells, and created some great work, did some great stuff, and it was fantastic.
Simple.
And then sold it within 5 years.
For how much, John? Tell us how much.
Is
it a private? Or is that
it was all in the press
family money
for 100 million sterling.
100 million?
100 million sterling. Did well. The boy done well.
Aussie boy.
That's why I go borrow money now, actually, if I want any money. Jasper, you got any cash?
So, John, do you wear a watch? I don't wear a watch.
I do wear a watch, but I never look at it.
It's 9 o'clock. Time is upon us.
I'm here to wrap it up.
You're going to wrap it up,
that's great.
Right.
Even though I could sit and listen all day long. But if you guys don't mind, I'd love to hand over to everyone in the audience. Just any questions that anyone might have for John?
Oh, yeah. Now that... Wait a minute. Who's got $20? Who's got $20 on you?
No, mate. I got a card. I can do it on a card.
Who's got $20? Anybody got $20? Philip, you got $20? It pays to be first. I've got a funny feeling you're connected, but anyway.
I know that guy.
Keep it in the family. Yes, you put your hand up. Good for you.
So, John, this one's for you, obviously. You talked a lot about building like these small brands and doing excellent creative work there. Do you think that's sustainable as they grow? I mean, you've gone to work with like these small brands and stuff, but do you think those big businesses and stuff, there's still like, you know, massive opportunity there?
Well, if I understand your question, if I was starting an agency today, I would only work with small, interesting brands. That's what I would do. And I would, you'd have to be young, you'd have to be that, you wouldn't have to have a family, you wouldn't have to have kids going to private school. And so, which, when you're young, you don't have all those things. So you've got to tailor your needs to your business. You're not going to. But I think that way, I've always thought, you're here for the long term, not the short term. Invest in your long-term career. And don't chase the money, chase the opportunity. That's the way you'll have a long career in any creative industry. And I think the way to do it is to start small and then big, and to hold on to that. If you can hold on to that, then you can work for large companies, but you do it on your terms, not their terms. And maybe that will change. But, you realize that it's the old story, isn't it? Success breeds your failure. And that maybe is a natural thing. You're going to grow, you're going to do well, and then it's going to stop being genius, and it's going to give somebody else an opportunity to come up behind you. But I do think, holding on to those credentials, holding on to those principles of, small companies and working with them and growing them is the way forward. And I would be definitely, if I was starting an agency today, I'd get cheap offices, I'd borrow furniture from somewhere, I'd have a large room, and I'd work from that and just get great people and have fun. That's the other thing, have fun.
Anyone else?
Another question. Sadly, no $20 for number two.
That's fine.
Yeah, but anyway, lovely. Yes. Do you want to say who you are?
I'm Natalie from the Colenso BBDO team.
Right.
There is, so again, a question for both of you. There is more data and insight available in the world about our customers, our audience, than there ever has been before. What role do you see that playing in the world of creativity, especially with your view of your triangle?
Yeah. Well, I think, data's always been important. I mean, it's always, this idea that we've suddenly invented data is kind of like, I always say that, that one of the greatest stories ever told, the Nativity, was born out of data collection, wasn't it? They were going to register to, they couldn't find anywhere at the inn. So this idea that data is new, that, we've come, I mean, because I've been around such a long time, you see all these things come through and somebody, this is it, this is the magic difference. And of course data is important, but the trouble is everybody's going to have the same data. And then what do you do? And so this idea, this is absolutely true. I was sitting next to the senior marketing officer of a very, very large organisation, which I won't name, which you will all know. And he said to me, John, it's brilliant now, we've got data, big data, and we can predict what people are going to do in 6 months' time. And I'm sitting there listening to this man. I'm thinking, good God, he's drunk the Kool-Aid. It's somebody, he actually believes that he can predict. Now, I did say to him, do you realise what you're saying, that you can predict? Because he couldn't tell me who was going to win Ascot at 3:30 the next day. That would be a prediction I'd like. I'd put lots of money on that horse. But they won't give you that prediction, will they? But they say they can predict the future. You cannot predict the future. And I said to him, very simple, I said, so you can predict the weather? And he looked at me and said, what do you mean? So I said, the weather has a phenomenal input on marketing. Because, if you're selling ice cream, by the way, if it's a good summer, you do well. If you're selling umbrellas and there's no rain, it's very bad, and all kinds of industries it affects. And he didn't really think about it. And so this idea that we can predict the future is a nonsense. I know people are saying it, but of course they're selling you something, aren't they? They're trying to say big data, and clients want to hear it. They want to hear, we can predict the future. And of course they rush off, oh God, we can predict the future, this is fantastic. And it's bullshit. And that's where you have to hold on to your bullshit kind of, factor and go, this is bullshit. But it's important. It's always been important. But it's not, it's creativity that makes the difference. And especially as everybody has the same data. Jim Carroll, our wonderful chairman, used to have a speech about it. He called it wind tunnel marketing. And he called it, and in the 80s, cars all started designing their cars and putting them in wind tunnels. And so they all ended up looking the same. And then suddenly somebody went, I don't know, all these cars are looking the same, there's no difference. And the point of a brand is difference. It's the only reason to have it. And so they stopped doing it. And he said, this is the big data debate. You'll all have the same data. You'll all have access to it. So what do you now do? Now you need an idea. But, you know, data is important. As I said, I call it knowledge. You know, some people call it data. But, you know, you're gonna have that. And you're going to have people who are going to become obsessed by it because they like, you know, they like figures. I mean, I've always believed that virtually all marketing directors, you know, go down every night on their knees and say, dear God, please will you make it a science? And God always comes back and says, look, mate, I've tried. But, you know, I gave them free will and that's it. That was the biggest mistake I ever made. And they've gone off and they've done all sorts of other things and I can't control them anymore. But, you know, they would love it to be a science. It is not a science. And it never will be. But, you know, there are people out there who want it to be. And you can't stop them wanting it. You know, they'll want it. You know, fine. Don't work with them. Go and work with somebody else. No, you've got to do that. You know, you just can't waste your time. Life's short. You know, the usual cliches. Anybody else?
And probably got time for one last question.
Yes,
Amy?
lady there.
Hello, I'm Amy. I'm also from Colenso. When you've got a truth that you want to tell and you've found a wonderful creative way of doing that,
Yeah.
what tools do you have to convince other people, clients, suits, other people in the business, that is the way that you think will work to tell the truth? You know, yes, you've got knowledge, yes, you've got the brand. Are there any tools that you have to help other people see things the way that you do?
Well, it's, you know, what you're asking is how do you sell a great idea, isn't it, really? And with great difficulty is the only thing I can say. But here's the trick I always used to use. And I've seen creative people get it wrong again and again and again if they're doing it. And the important thing is to use the language of the client when you're selling them an idea, not your language. So, you know, what happens is, you know, I've seen it and I've watched it, oh God, they've screwed that completely. And they're talking about things that they love. You know, I love it because it's this and it's cool and it's that. And if you use the word cool, I'd honestly show you the door. I don't want cool things, I want hot things. I want something hot, you know, I mean, cool. Bugger cool, I want hot, you know. But it's to find ways of convincing the client that you've understood their problem. That is the most important thing you can do. If you've convinced them you've understood what their problem is, they're more likely to listen to you when you have a solution to that problem. And that's the thing, that's, I suppose you can say, is the art of salesmanship. But that's a way of making sure the client will listen to you, because that's what you're trying to get somebody to listen to you. And I think you've got to couch your selling in those terms. I've understood this problem, you've got that, and use their words, not yours. Because, you know, we fall into our language very easily. And it's just somebody thinks you're just talking that advertising bullshit now. So, you know, that isn't the great way of selling work. So that's what I would do.
And I think the stuff that we're sort of doing, you know, Colenso, like problem design, you know, solution design, delivery design, all that, is exactly what John's kind of saying there. It's like really understand the problem, and then when you talk about the solution, it's really just a very, very obvious, you know, and whether it's creative, whether it's blue, whether it's this or that and the other, doesn't really matter. It's just a brilliant solution to a really tough problem that they've got, and you've all agreed. And then it becomes easy to sell. If it's an opinion, I like this, and you know, I think you're going to like it too. It's kind of like, whoa, we got no reference
cool.
points. Yeah, or it's cool.
If you use
I'd
the
probably
word
say
cool,
that
you're
a
dead.
lot.
You're dead.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Oh, it's gone. You lost that.
Lost
that idea.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I'm sure we
Wonderful.
enjoyed that, but if everyone can join me in thanking Nick and John.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Well done, Nick. Well done. Lovely.
Thanks,
Great
John.
stuff. Great stuff. Great stuff.